Rounding into Comics and Brett R. Smith present An Escape from the Future.
Welcome to Escape from the Future, brought to you by Rounding into Comics. I'm your host and comic veteran, Brett R. Smith, and joining me today is another comic veteran and a good friend, Graham Nolan. Graham is a comic book writer and artist best known for his work for DC Comics on Batman-related titles and is the co-creator and designer of the villain BANE. He's also the publisher of Compass Comics and an Inkpot award-winning recipient. Great to see you, brother.
Hey, good to be here, Brett.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so we were talking about this off air, and before we jump into all the exciting new books you're producing, I wanted to get your take on AI and how you think it's going to influence comic book artists going forward. I was talking with a buddy the other day, a fellow creator, and we were talking about improving his skills. You know, how do you improve your skills? And we both agreed that the best way to do that is to always go back to the fundamentals. And when I mean fundamentals, I'm like, talk about go back to like How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way or Will Eisner's graphic storytelling, which both really teach the basic old school fundamentals of drawing and visual storytelling. And, you know, with AI now available to guys like us, do you think this is going to be a tool which will be used to just kind of cut basic corners, like using a light box? Or do you think it will lead to something more and more artists rely on really heavily, which in turn, I think, atrophies those old school fundamentals that we're taught?
Well, it's irrelevant what I think, because it's here and it's here to stay.
I know.
I don't like it, but I can see it being used as a tool the same way Photoshop is used as a tool.
Yeah, me too.
As a tool, or digital, tablets for drawing and stuff like that. What the AI does is it takes the art. It can take a schlub that can describe something very good and make him think he's an artist. If he can't tell me what a triadic color is, or explain color theory, among many, the 180 rule, he's not a storyteller. He's not a an artist by any means. But I can see where artists could use this as a really cool tool. For example, let's say you've got some weird story that you are having a hard time laying out. Like the scenery around it. Let's say you've got, Genghis Khan has invaded, 15th century England, and he's fighting, Robin Hood's merry men and King Richard and all that other shit, and there's a so you need the castle, you need the landscape, you need Genghis Khan and all his stuff. You could actually describe some of that stuff,
right,
and have it lay it out for you in a way where, okay, I can use this as a springboard.
Right.
Like,
right.
I could say, okay, well, I could take this and make it different or better or something like that. So I could see it being used as a tool, but I can also, I know it will be abused.
Right.
And it's going to put a lot of artists out of work. It's already being done. You watch any kind of sports show or network thing, ads, they're already inserting these like teaser things, images. Like if a sports show is doing something about the football draft or something like that, they might have an AI image of all the draftees, behind the NFL logo or something. And they took them 5 minutes to create it. No artist got paid for it. So it's going to become a very easy and lazy tool for people that are cheap and don't want to hire the artist. So it's a double-edged sword, to be sure.
Yeah, I can totally see it being used, like you described, for sort of a previs, where you get an idea down, an image down, which then you can you can move things around, you can adjust it if you don't like certain things. And I don't think that's, I've worked in advertising, I've worked in comics, and in both, I've used a lot of reference material. I look at things, right? And then I interpret them onto the page. Sometimes when doing storyboards for advertising, you use reference stuff. You're literally just like, you're cobbling images together. And sometimes you photocomps and you use real photos and you just do this Photoshop mashup, right? Because at the end of the day, with advertising, that stuff goes in the trash after the presentation.
It's all about the finished product.
Yeah, exactly. But I think previs, it could be like I was talking about, sort of the you know, the light box being used by so many artists. I use them. Everybody uses them. They're brilliant. They're wonderful. You know, and it's the same, like you said, with Photoshop, but at the same time, and in fact, I think you've posted some stuff or shared some stuff on Facebook of a comic that was obviously laid out in some kind of AI, and every shot was basically the same. It's like these medium shots, right? Or these close-ups. It doesn't understand how to adjust the camera, where to place the camera, why you're placing the camera in these certain positions, or the point of view in these certain positions, as far as like, is it an establishing shot? You know, is it something that looks like, you know, do you need a close up here? But all of that psychology that's built into the fundamentals of visual storytelling, it doesn't really get unless you give it the prompts. I think, and I'm not even sure if it really understands that stuff yet, but it probably will soon. You know, but it's
I've
like,
seen comic books done in AI. The Buffalo Bills just did one recently. The one that I posted on Twitter. And it's all surface detail. It's all beautifully rendered stuff.
Right.
It all looks the same. There's no sense of depth. I've seen some AI stuff like I think the prompt was, you know, Albrecht Dürer meets you know, Frank Frazetta or something like that. I forget what it was, but it was some really cool, way out fantasy shit. That was freaking amazing, and I didn't even realize it was AI. And that's the scary part. Is that this stuff is,
when you don't know.
And it can, you know, it's connected to the web around the world, so it can pull stuff from everywhere to create. And it's but that's its thing, is it's pulling other people's work.
Well, yeah, and what do you think about that from the standpoint of legitimate copyright infringement?
Yeah, well, you know, there's a lot of entertainment lawyers that are going into this right now, discussing if there's certain elements that can be proven that were taken, you know, in stories, because they're using them for plots and stories as well in Hollywood. If it can be proven that this concept was taken from something, you got to pay royalties on that.
Right.
You know, same thing with images. You know, if let's say, you know, all of a sudden you see this painting, it looks just like Frazetta, but you've never seen that painting before, you know, because it's in Frazetta style, you know, they're going to have to pay the Frazetta estate for that.
Right.
But you know, but what it does is it really loses the charm of the artist. For example, and this is an example I've used on other shows that we've talked about AI, and I'm really against it for this reason. If I tell this thing that I want to have a beagle on top of a doghouse wearing a World War I cap, you know, it's going to render a beagle on a doghouse, and it's going to lose all the charm of Charles Schultz's depiction of Snoopy on a doghouse. That's the aspect of the cartoonist, the mind of him. It doesn't have to be rendered and fully executed in color and depth and all that other stuff. You know, it's a line drawing of this little character, and that's where all the charm is. You know, but I'm not saying that it won't get to that level, because the algorithms and the growth of this stuff is happening exponentially. I mean, for God's sake, did nobody watch Terminator? You know, I mean, Jesus
I know.
Christ.
I know. We were talking about
out of control.
The robot dog with the flamethrower that we're all watching on social media. I mean, it's straight out of Terminator.
There's going to be a gun mounted on it sometime.
Yeah. It's
just a matter of time.
Yeah, you know, the charm is tied to the soul of each artist, you know, and what they individually bring, and everything is different. It's like a thumbprint. There's nothing, everyone's is unique, right? So I think about it from that standpoint, that a lot of the stuff that I see might be visually interesting and stimulating sometimes, but I find it sort of soulless and kind of cold. And that's sort of the weird part about it, and I can typically kind of tell not only by the rendering, because it has no idea what focal points are. It renders everything with this hyper, this hyper detail and all this shine and sheen, and you know, for some reason. But to me, it just looks machine made. It just looks cold, you know. And not to say that a machine couldn't make a burger better, but I don't think at this point that it's making art that's better than what actual artists, real humans who have souls and put their soul and their heart into their art. You know, it's just, it's just not translating. But
the art is the result of the life experience of the artist himself.
Right.
or herself, and it won't have that. And I think eventually what we're going to see is a rise of mediocrity,
Hmm.
because there is nothing that is coming, as you said, from the soul or the heart.
Right.
And so you're going to get these, like Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox.
Yeah.
It may look
Yeah.
kind of cool. It might be interesting. It might even be stimulating to look at, but it's not going to have that soul and that heart that the artist brought with him from a lifetime of experiences.
Yeah. 30, 40 years. I
Mhm.
mean, that's someone like you who's put in that amount of
Yeah,
time and work, honing your craft, expanding.
sure.
I just think to myself, it's not the same. Maybe they'll be able to make it look the same, but at this point, to me, it's not quite there yet. But
Well,
the
you look at
faster.
Jack Kirby. I mean, Jack Kirby was a product of his East Side upbringing and his experiences in World War II.
Mhm.
His action, his violence that he would show in his comics, it was all about that. Um, and that was unique to him. So every Jack Kirby story and artwork is a product of those experiences, and they're very clear and unique.
Yeah.
A million people try to ape that stuff, but it never has that same soul.
Yeah. 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 That's I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, you're absolutely right. They're all, I mean, every artist is unique, which is why they need to harness their own unique capabilities and
Mhm,
vision and what they
mhm,
do best.
yeah,
And, it's, this thing is it's like an imitator.
mhm.
It's not coming from the same place that we are when we sit down to draw a page or color a page. It's a
It's
completely
the
different
thing
animal.
from another world.
Yeah.
It's been stuck in the ice all this time, and now it's come out, and, it's not really, Child's. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, oof, well, that's a scary way to think about it. Um, yeah, it's interesting, man. I hope at some point in time that people start to see the difference. But I think a lot of you talk about a rising mediocrity. I think that Hollywood's been using AI for a while to probably A/B test certain things.
Mhm.
I forget, some director came out and said recently that they were going to do a sequel to something, and then they ran it through AI, and they decided that if they did this female protagonist sequel, it would fail. So they just scrapped the whole thing. And I think that's partially why we have this precipitous decline in quality out of Hollywood, is probably because a lot of this stuff they've been utilizing AI already, probably for quite some time. You
That
know
and that it's populated by talentless hacks.
that too.
So that's the
Completely.
other thing.
Well, I mean, they're all a bunch of DEI hires at this point. I mean,
Right.
that's clear. So, I mean,
Yeah.
they're obviously not hiring the best. They're
Yeah.
hiring based on race and gender, which
Yep.
last time I checked, the Civil Rights Act and the EEOC, that's illegal, man. I mean, you can't
Mhm.
do that kind of stuff. So I hope that these
Yeah.
lawsuits that
Meritocracy is gone.
well, I mean, the America First Legal has their lawsuit against Disney for doing this, for basically discriminating against white Christians and Jews as
Mhm.
well under this DEI stuff. And I hope that that goes somewhere. So
Yeah.
there's another guy who wrote for that Navy SEALs show, I think on CBS. He's suing because he
Oh,
got
good.
axed because he's white and he's a man. And as they say in Hollywood, pale, male, and stale. You got to
Mm.
stay away from that.
Yeah, okay.
It's insane.
Mhm.
Anyway, let's talk about Compass Comics, which
Sure.
is where you are creating all your new titles like Joe Frankenstein, Ghosts of Matacumbe Key, and Return to Monster Island. First, when did you start Compass Comics? And then give us a rundown on the current titles you have going on.
Sure. I started Compass Comics in 1998. Even back then, I wasn't liking the direction of comics, and I felt that they were getting too sexualized, too violent. Um, this is when I was working at DC, and I was under exclusive contract with them, so they would send me everything that they printed, and I'd get this big box, and I'd go through it. And my daughters at the time were young. I couldn't give them the kind of comics my mom used to be able to go to a 7-Eleven and pick up for me.
Yeah.
Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Flash, all those classic heroes, because of those reasons I cited. Um, the only thing I could give them out of those boxes were Scooby-Doo. They had the Warner Brothers cartoon characters, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, that kind of stuff. Um, and an occasional the Batman animated stuff too.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Superman animated, I could give them that.
Right.
And so I got to thinking, what happened to great stories that everybody could read? you know, like the great comic strips back in the golden age of comic strips, where everybody in America read these adventure stories, the Buzz Sawyers, the Steve Canyons, you know, the Terry and the Pirates, Captain Easy and Wash Tubbs and Captain Easy,
Prince Valiant.
Prince Valiant, you know,
Yeah.
Tarzan.
Yeah.
You know, there was so many of these wonderful things that kids read and adults read, and they could all enjoy them on different levels.
Yeah.
The true all ages comic, without the pejorative term of all ages, which always means writing down for kids. So that's where I got the idea of doing Monster Island. Was I love monsters. I love those adventure strips, and I married the two together.
Yeah.
And created the story about these naval flyers because I was a huge Buzz Sawyer fan. And I wrote that for my daughters and for my friends. And so that was the first book that I had done for, you should be on the Compass Comics site.
Oh, do you have previews up over there of this stuff? I just wanted to show some of the artwork.
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is a Return to Monster Island.
Yeah. What you were talking about. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And this is all colored by is it Dan Brown?
No.
Or is this you?
Nope. It's
very Top Gun right there.
I have to look. I can't remember who colored it.
Okay.
It was done a few years ago, so I don't remember. There was a gentleman. Nanjan Jambari.
Okay.
The Indian colorist, really good.
Yeah.
So you know, I published Monster Island in 1998. At that point, comics were going through an implosion, and so it didn't profit me enough to do the next, because I wanted to do it as a 3-part series: Monster Island, Return to Monster Island, Escape to Monster Island. So I shelved it. I kept the company, and then, as you know, I went into newspaper strips and did work for King Features Syndicate for 13 years. Got out of comic books.
Yeah, you worked on the Phantom, and you also worked on Rex Morgan, MD. You know, you're talking about the old strips, which everybody loved and everybody used to read.
Yeah,
those are hugely read and hugely popular, and they're old. They're these classic strips that have endured how many decades? It's crazy.
Yeah. But that became soul sucking.
Did it?
You know, as much as I tried to revitalize the strips in its art and storytelling and stuff like that, King Features just didn't give a shit.
Really? That's too bad.
They really didn't care. Those were legacy strips.
Yeah.
So the money was coming in regardless of what we did. So you know, I just didn't feel like there was any appreciation. There was no growth. There was no raises coming. You know, so I got back into comics, freelancing, and then I discovered crowdfunding, because I worked on a book with Chuck called The Expendables Go to Hell.
Oh yeah,
and so we worked with Richard Meyer, who crowdfunded it, and Sylvester Stallone, of course. And I saw what crowdfunding could do and how it was done. Because you know, I had gotten together with Ominous Press earlier, like 2015, and they wanted to do Monster Island and Return to Monster Island, and they crowdfunded it on Kickstarter, and so we did Return to Monster Island through them, but you know, it didn't do that well crowdfunding, and so I was like, you know, I was seeing successful crowdfunds, and I was telling them, we have to reach out to these audiences. You know, I have, you know, a lot of my fans know me as a conservative guy. We need to reach out to conservatives, that love comics, that feel disenfranchised by what's happening in the mainstream media. And they didn't do that. And, you know, they got, you know, maybe 350 backers. You know, maybe it paid for itself. I don't know.
Right.
But you know, I got the rights back, and then that's when I decided, you know, I would relaunch it with Monster Island, Return to Monster Island, and then at the end of the year, I'll be doing the brand new Escape from Monster Island.
Nice.
But so I sort of skipped ahead there in the timeline, because after I had done The Expendables Go to Hell, I decided, well, I'm going to do my own thing here. You know, there's nothing for me at Marvel and DC. They're not interested in hiring me for a number of reasons. So I'm going
They
to.
can't afford you anymore, man.
Yeah, not now. They
I
can't.
mean, I can't believe what they can afford. I mean, it's all foreign, it's all cheap foreign labor over there.
Oh yeah,
Aside from basic, kind of like the flagship books, I think they're still keeping some
yeah.
American artists on those. But the more and more I look at these new issues and I look at, the credits, and it's all foreign people that I've never heard of. And it's just
That
sad,
it looks
man.
like they picked them up from Behance pages.
It's
You know,
awful. It's
it looks like
awful.
fan art, a lot of it, you know.
It does. It's so embarrassing when you think about 20 years ago what they had when I was coloring for them, and I'm working with Nicola Scott, and I'm working with Walt Simonson and Frank Cho, and and guys like you. I mean, everybody was in circulation back then, and now
Oh
you
yeah.
see this big exodus of DC artists with Image, with this Skybound imprint, and man, there just doesn't seem to be any reason for top tier talent, guys who really understand commercial art, visual storytelling, how to create visuals that sell. They all see the money in creator owned stuff. I think at this point, like you did, like I did, we're all sort of seeing this transition into the indie comics. I think it's probably the most exciting indie comics market that I've seen since the 90s Bad Girl craze, which is when I got my start. It's a pretty thriving, healthy market, largely because of crowdfunding.
Yeah, because we've discovered an untapped audience, that audience that loved comics that haven't bought them in years, who had left comics because of all the woke nonsense that was being put in. Woke nonsense on top of bad execution.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah.
So so I decided I had two properties that I had shopped around to multiple publishers, and they all turned them down. One was the Chenu, and one was the next one was Alien Alamo. And
Gotcha.
horror is bulletproof. So I figured I like monsters. That's my thing. That's my jam. I'm gonna do a straight up rated R horror story. And so that was the first one, first book under Compass Comics banner to get revived, to revive the Compass Comics banner that I crowdfunded. And I think I raised $96,000 on that one.
Nice.
Then the next one was Alien Alamo, and that raised like 115,000. Then I did Giant Size Two-Fisted Manly Tales, which was an anthology book that raised 132,000.
Wow.
Then I did The Ghost of Matacumba Key, which raised 206,000.
I love this cover. It's just so beautiful. Did Kelsey Shannon color this?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just amazing.
Yeah, he's great.
He's got such a throwback style. He's so graphic, and he goes back to those. I mean, he is like master of old school fundamentals. But I'm looking at what he's doing with Mike on that new Nexus, and it's just stunning.
It is. Yeah,
it's like he's channeling Toph. It's incredible, absolutely incredible. But I love this cover. I mean, it's just got such mood, and the colors are just beautiful.
Yeah, he really enhances everything with those great.
I mean,
colors.
you give him some great stuff to work with, so credit where it's due as well.
Right. Well, it's good design elements there, but
beautifully rendered.
Kelsey definitely ran with it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is really cool. I've been wanting to check this out because it looks darker than typically the type of stories that you tell, which is interesting. But I love how your stuff is commercial and it's open to lots of different people. I mean, who doesn't like monsters? Who doesn't like kind of tales of high adventure? And that's sort of what I get from the kind of stuff that you grew up liking and that you channel into the stuff that you create now, which is really cool.
I'm glad you mentioned high adventure, because that is definitely one of the aspects to all my books that they contain. One of my favorite B movies was The Mummy's Hand from 1940. And it's really the precursor of Indiana Jones. You got this two-fisted archaeologist and his sidekick. There's humor, there's horror, and they mix it together. And I was like, that's my blueprint. That's what I want to do.
Who stars in that? Who's the
Dick
lead?
Ferran is the lead.
Gotcha.
Peggy
because that indie archetype and look, there's a movie with Charlton Heston where he's kind of dressed similar. There's, that's a look that they kind of copied from past films. I think
Yeah.
even Alan Ladd's in something where he's dressed kind of similarly in the
Okay.
fedora and the jacket and everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
This
yeah,
guy
it's
didn't
cool.
have the fedora and jacket. He had the pith helmet and
Okay.
that kind of stuff. But he was a
Mhm.
two-fisted,
Yeah.
Dick Foran was a singing cowboy star back in
Oh,
the day.
nice. Okay.
So, and he was, part of John Ford's group too.
Mhm.
Um, did a lot of B movies and who was in some A movies too,
Yeah.
but,
But I mean, that's the
primarily
type
B.
of stuff where they would write for everybody. They wanted meat in the seats, man. They wanted as many people in that theater and enjoying that movie as possible, going home, telling their
Yeah.
friends, then you go and see it again. And I think that used to be the ethos and sort of the modus operandi of Marvel and DC and mainstream comics. It isn't anymore. It's
Yeah.
about activism. It's about messaging.
Yeah.
And,
Messaging. Yeah.
and they've even sort of abandoned the belief, I think the truth, that comics are a visual medium first and
Mhm.
foremost. If that image on the cover doesn't grab you by the throat and then make you pick it up and flip through it, nothing's happening. It's kind of like music. Sting said, I saw this interview with Sting where he said, if a piece of music, if a song I've never heard doesn't surprise me in the first 30 seconds, I'm out.
Mm.
I'm checked out. And I think that's largely how people are with comics. If that cover, regardless of the concept, that cover doesn't grab you, you're done. And it's the same with the interiors.
Oh
Those
yeah.
have always also
You
got to
need
kill.
to, Stan and Jack knew the power of an opening.
Mhm.
And one of the instances I like to point out is there was I think it's Fantastic Four 27 maybe. It opens up on the splash page of this baby dinosaur running towards you inside the Baxter building, and the thing is like falling ass over elbows on this couch. The torch is, he's shooting fire at the dinosaur. The invisible girl is like trying to save her dresses and all the stuff from all the stuff that's going on. And then it goes for maybe 2 more pages where they finally capture this dinosaur, and Sue is all upset because all her clothing has been destroyed by the fire, by the torch and all this kind of stuff. Has nothing to do with the story. It opens with this dinosaur because he came through Dr. Doom's time machine.
Okay.
And that's what the story focuses on. That's what gets you to the time machine, that this little dinosaur had come through. I think Reed was working on it and it got away from him or something like that.
Nice.
But, instead of just opening up in a scientific lab with Reed tinkering, there's no action there. There's nothing happening.
Right.
But, Jack laid this thing out so that it sucks you in from the first page. Like, I got to where'd this dinosaur come from? Here's the splash page. All this shit is happening.
Right.
And I don't know why. And I need to know why.
Right. Yeah.
That's great storytelling.
Well,
and that's
also
what's missing a lot of this stuff. People sit around and drinking milkshakes in a
Right.
pizza shop and talk about how hard it is to be a superhero.
Yeah,
Fuck
there's
you. Go save the world.
too much dialogue. And I was taught through how to draw comics the Marvel way, graphic storytelling, that there's got to be action or something happening in nearly every single frame. Yeah. That's part of the mechanism which gets the reader to advance.
Yeah, if it's not action, it has to be implied action.
Right, exactly. And then on top of that, there's a psychology to boys who love action and adventure, and that used to also be the target demographic for most comics was boys, probably starting 6 all the way on up to 13.
Yeah,
when I in the 80s,
that was
and
the magic window.
Yeah, exactly. And what's amazing is that you can make comics that span. I mean, that's a big window, right? I mean, typically 6 to 9 is those early readers. They're typically following along visually, but if you can write and produce stuff for that big of a window of demographics, multiple demographics, you're going to sell a lot of comics. And that's exactly what the big two used to do. They don't anymore because they've abandoned those things. They've abandoned that demographic because they've abandoned their fundamentals.
Right.
So,
the thing we have to remind ourselves here is that we're talking about comics as an art form. But when I'm criticizing them, I'm talking about the superhero genre that we publish in America.
Yeah.
An art form has no limits. You can tell any kind of story in comics. If you want to tell, gay stories, fine. That's great. But find your market for that. To be successful, you have to find your market. if you have personal stories you want to tell, great. Again, find your market.
Mhm.
What I object to vociferously is this children's entertainment, which is superhero comics,
Yeah.
being turned into brainwashing style comics that does not reflect the readership at all. If
Mhm.
it did, the numbers would be a lot better.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't reflect the society either. You know,
Yeah.
all the race swapping, the pandering, the uh, uh, gender swapping. You know, all of these things
Yeah.
are fine if you're seeking that audience and you want to create something to tailor to that audience, but they're lazy bastards is what it is so they
Big
take
time.
Green Lantern, the Golden Age Green Lantern, who was the first married superhero in comics, and in the I think early 2000s they turn him gay, and the
Mhm.
first time we see him is sucking some guy's face on a tarmac. Great. Oh, that's great. You've just taken this wonderful character that somebody else had created, been around for 40 years, instead of doing the heavy lifting and
Right.
creating a character that's interesting on its own merit and not being defined solely by the fact that he's gay.
Yeah.
That drives me absolutely crazy, that kind of laziness. And then
Laziness.
if you
Yes.
don't buy it or don't like it, you're a homophobe or you're a racist or
Right.
you throw the word in there. No, it's just people don't want that. It's bad. It's bad storytelling, and it's poorly executed.
Do you think it's lazy, or do you think that these people have absolutely no talent, or both?
I think the publishers do it because they're being hypocritical. They're pandering. They think that they need to do that to earn ESG points or something.
Right.
I don't think they
Or
believe
cover.
any of that.
Maybe they're running cover so they don't get attacked. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it
You
could
know?
be any of that. Um, Frank Zappa once said about the music business, and it's a very good analogy, that when the cigar chomping, producers ran the music business, um, they didn't pretend to know what the audience was. They
Mhm.
didn't know. If somebody was going to write a song, about tiptoeing through the tulips or something like that, what do I know? Try
Right.
and sell it. They took risks and chances,
Yeah.
and then you get the music school people come in, and just same way you got your art school and comic fandom comes in, and then they start trying to tell you what's good, what's not good, instead of just throwing spaghetti against the wall, see what sticks,
Right.
and maybe creating a new genre for yourselves and finding your audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that bravery that's gone.
I love that story from Zappa. I encourage people to check it out. It's on YouTube. It's a great quote because it applies so easily to comics. I mean,
Mhm.
because music is in an industry similar to comics where you're dealing with business people and creatives, and
Mhm.
it's those old A&R guys that he was talking about that would throw spaghetti up against a wall to see what stick. And sometimes it would just produce a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
But that was enough because it was bringing in lots of revenue and it
Mhm.
connected with a certain audience. But then you get these guys that come in who become the arbiters of what is cool and what shall pass through the gates
Right.
because they
Yeah.
know better because they're
The
these
gatekeeper.
educated intellectuals or something. Yeah. It's
Well,
the ultimate irony. We blast those, we kind of mock those cigar chomping, old school
yeah.
guys, but things
But
were better
those
when they
were,
were running things.
Stan Lee,
Yeah.
Carmine Infantino, they were old school cigar chomping guys. They did smoke
Yeah.
cigars, and
Did Jim Shooter smoke? Was he a smoker? I bet he
I
was.
don't think so. I
No?
don't
Yeah.
think so.
So,
Um, but as I said, the first two things that I crowdfunded, the Shinu and Alien Animal, were both. I was told both of them, that they wouldn't sell. You know,
yeah.
um, but I went out and found my market for it because I
Yeah.
thought they were good. I thought they would sell, and they did.
Sure.
They did
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, absolutely. I just brought up Big Jim Shooter. There's an interview of him recently talking about Marvel, and he basically said that they're not in the business of entertainment anymore. He said
No.
that what they're putting out is propaganda, and he said nobody wants propaganda in their entertainment. And I'm kind of surprised that didn't make the rounds on social media. I need to clip that article and post it because it's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
But I was kind of shocked, but at the same time I wasn't, because that guy I think also understood how to sell comics,
Yeah.
especially, you know, when he was in his heyday before he got fired. But he went on to go do it at Valiant, and it's just kind of amazing to me. You know, it's amazing to me that Marvel or DC doesn't have guys like that in some capacity teaching the next generation, so you can have this flourishing market. But at the same time, you know, I think we're at that point where the indie market is robust, and it's a direct market.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes, you know, I think 20 years ago we needed the big two. We needed that big umbrella to kind of support the rest of, you know, the little boats, right? You know, and then you have the big boats, and the tide
Mhm.
rises. But I
Well,
don't know. I don't know if you need that anymore.
let's back up on that, because it's not that we needed them, it's that we had no other choice.
Mm,
They ran a distribution
right.
as well. So, like, even if you
That's a
wanted to
great point.
start up a company of your own, you had no way to distribute it to the markets that were out there at that time.
Right.
It's only because of the internet, and crowdfunding, where you are able to skip all those middlemen, not seek permission by the big two,
Mhm.
and seek and find your own happiness
Yeah.
and your own creative muse, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. If you can think it and dream it, you can do it. That's
Yeah.
what Walt Disney said, and it's so true.
Mhm.
And you'll
Yeah.
find a market for it. You know, but it's hard work. You have to work hard. You got to know who you are. You got to know who your audience is, and you got to know how to reach them, how to get to them.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, making comics is hard, man. That's something else I was talking to my buddy about the other day. It's tough. It is not an easy task whatsoever. Even the
no,
guys like us who have decades of experience in the industry. But I think that if you want to make a comic today, an indie comic, and go direct, I think it's probably the best time in comics to be able to do that. And I think distribution is probably the biggest impediment, which has been lowered, or, you know, it doesn't really exist like it did back when it was Diamond, and that was it.
hmm
They were the one source point for distributing comics to everybody and every retailer, and that's just not the case anymore. And that's kind of opened up
Well, back in the
the
'80s, there
market.
was at least 4 distributors. You know, there was
Right,
Capital City,
right.
there was
Remember Capital?
Diamond, there was, Pacific,
Yeah,
and I feel like there was one more that Heroes World.
right.
Yeah, so
That's
you
right.
had 4 major distributors all over in different parts of the country,
Right.
that
Yeah, I
you
worked.
could use multiple distributors.
Right. I worked at a comic book store in the 90s, and I remember it was Diamond, and I think it was Capital City that we used. I think those were the two. And then
Yeah,
obviously it
that's
kind
a
of got
big one.
consolidated. But
Yeah.
now, you know, even Marvel and DC, it seems like I mean, I know DC started their own distribution, so it's all sort of broken up and sort of been decentralized, which I think is overall is very good.
Yeah, one of them is using Random House, Penguin
Mhm.
Random House, and the other one is using, I believe it was it Jim Haney's
Hmm.
company? I can't remember now.
Maybe so.
I don't keep up on what they're doing because I have no
Me
interest
neither.
in working for them. So I just
Yeah.
hear stuff on the side, you know.
Yeah, same here. I'm just it's just so off my radar. I'm
Mhm.
looking at the indie comics market, and I'm looking at guys like you, because that's where all the exciting creators are.
Mhm.
They've left Marvel and DC, and like I said, you know, I mentioned Skybound before. That was I'm surprised that didn't make more news in the comic book world, because that's a huge shift. I mean, there was at least, I mean, half a dozen guys, if not more, that bailed. Francis Manapul, Brad Anderson. I'm sure they're still doing some work, maybe here and there for DC, but these are books that they're going to do and distribute through Image. And you know, I was just kind of like, why isn't this bigger news? You
Mhm.
know. But
Mhm.
you know, I was talking. You know, I interviewed Brian Polito as well a couple months back, and we were talking about distribution. You know, the differences between the '90s Batgirl craze and that indie comic market and today. And you know, he echoes a lot of what you're saying, which is, you know, you can really go direct to people now. You
Yeah.
don't have to rely on connecting with people or finding your fans at the cons, which was kind of the you know, the point of entry for a lot of people for new
Yeah.
stuff. You know, you'd meet people, you'd schmooze, you'd hang out at the booth. That's how you got your book out there. Now you can kind of take that con on the social media and
Yeah.
and reach out to people, which I think has also been great for comic creators and
Yeah,
the indie
YouTube
market.
is essential. You have to have a YouTube presence. You have to have content to give to build your audience, and then have that audience, basically what I say is that if your audience falls in love with you,
Mhm,
they're willing to give your book a shot because
mhm.
they say, "Oh, this guy's a nice guy, or he's an entertaining guy, and he's got this new book. I'm willing to give it a shot."
Mhm.
Um, but if you don't, and you can't do that, then you're screwed because
Yeah.
that's how you're going to reach the most people is through YouTube. The algorithms on the other places, Facebook is ridiculous.
Mhm.
If I post a link on anything, forget about it. 20 people will see it, and it's the same 20 people.
That's so strange.
Yeah,
Because Polito, that's his biggest force multiplier is Facebook. That's where he reaches the most people for some reason. And that's where he's put a lot of, I think, most of his energy in. He's not doesn't really do a whole lot of YouTube, doesn't do a whole lot of Twitter, but Coffin Comics and those guys just are monster presence on Facebook.
well,
So
they
I
must be paying for the
probably
because if you don't, and that's what Facebook encourages you to do.
sure.
Yeah, because that's why the algorithms. If you put a hyperlink in there,
Right.
bam, throttled back.
YouTube has this new thing that if you mention their competition in a video, they will downgrade your video. You won't get as many impressions. So it's like,
Interesting.
don't even mention the competition. And it's the same with Twitter. You post things,
Mhm.
external links to Substack or things that potentially are in competition with Twitter, and they will lower those impressions because they want you to create that stuff there.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
But yeah, I hate being slaves to the algorithm, man. That's the thing that drives me crazy with some of these platforms, that all of us have to sort of navigate, you
yeah,
know.
definitely.
Talk about we talked about Ghost of Matacumbe Key. We talked about the Chenoo. We talked about Return to Monster Island, Alien Alamo. What about Joe Frankenstein? Because I know you've got something cooking there.
Yeah, I'm actually we're going to be launching the third Joe Frankenstein book, the campaign for it at least,
Mhm.
very shortly in this month in May. And the guy who did the cover there, Anthony Gonzalez Clark, is going to be
Great
doing the
guy.
interiors.
Great guy. I just worked with him recently on a small project,
Ah,
and he's
Anthony's
just
great, amazing talent.
tremendously talented. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great guy.
So we've got him to do the interiors because I can't do them because I have to do Escape from Monster Island at the end of the year.
Right.
So Chuck and I are writing it together like we did the first one,
Mhm.
and then Anthony's going to draw it, and we're going to launch that campaign probably within the next week or so. At
Cool.
least the sign up
Mhm.
will start next week,
Nice.
and then probably launch it by the end of May.
Yeah, he's got a great style. He's got a great there's some anime influence there, but at the same time it bleeds over into sort of more traditional American comics. He's got a nice blend.
Yes, yeah, and he's got just great color sense.
Yeah.
He's really good digitally, you
Mhm.
know. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to working with Anthony on this book and seeing what he does with our we talked about the Mummy's Hand, and
Mhm.
this third book, it's called The Eye of Ra. And it has the monster back in 1927, with Joe's great grandfather, or Frederick Frankenstein,
Mhm.
also known as Doc Frankenstein, and he's like a two-fisted action guy, like a Doc Savage type character. And he and the
Mhm.
monster are seeking the Eye of Ra, which is what was used to destroy the vampires back in ancient Egypt.
Oh wow.
And so we got all this shit inside the pyramids and just a
Wow.
lot of fun action adventure stuff in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it reminds me it's kind of a callback to like things like Johnny Quest. That's sort of
Yeah,
it just reminded me of,
yeah.
that's just fun stuff. Everybody loves that stuff, man. There's no agenda. It's just escapist entertainment, which I think is largely why people go to comics. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, that's what
movies
it
and
should
TV.
be, you know? Take 20
Absolutely.
minutes, half an hour to read it and, get your mind somewhere else,
Yeah, yeah. It's healthy. You got to recharge that way.
Mhm.
So right now you've got Return to Monster Island as in demand on Indiegogo, correct?
Correct, yeah. So
Okay.
people can still back it.
Mhm.
It will be up there a little while longer, as I'm working on there was an 8-page addition to the book because we hit the $100,000 stretch goal on it. So I'm working on page 6 of that, and once I get all 8 pages done and the files formatted, then it'll go off to the printer. But that's when it'll come down from in demand. So you've got a little while longer to back it, but I wouldn't wait too much longer, because then you'll have to wait till it's fulfilled and show up on the Compass Comics website, and then you're paying more for it, and you're not getting all the stretch goal goodies either. So
cool. Yeah. And then back issues of Ghost of Matacumbe Key and others, those you can pick up on compasscomics.com.
Yes, all previous books are at the compasscomics.com website. All my books go up there after my backers are fulfilled first. They're the ones that made it happen, so they get everything first. They get it, all the goodies with it. They get it at the lowest price. But then once that's done, then everything will show up on my website.
Very cool.
In the store.
This is great. Did you guys take out some? You guys have a Compass Comics headquarters now, don't you?
Yes, it's a building that we're renting that's our fulfillment center, basically.
Nice.
My wife works for the company, and she's in charge of fulfillment and shipping, and she does a great job. And so that's where she goes when we're doing fulfillment. And
that's cool.
Then I work on all my nonsense.
Yeah, no, it's great. You guys are a great team. Okay, so last question: what are you watching? Any TV shows or movies, new or old, that you can recommend?
I just got done watching I forget the director's name who did Bone Tomahawk.
Oh yeah, S. Craig Zoller. He's fantastic.
Yeah. I just watched Dragged Across Concrete and Brawl in Cell Block 99.
Yeah. Okay. So Chuck and I are we love this guy, and we talked about this guy at length. Brawl in Cell Block, I think that's our favorite. That's Chuck and his son's favorite, but I think that's his strongest at this point. I really like Dragged Across Concrete. I like all of his films, but I think that Cell Block it's like a perfect movie from start to finish.
I like Dragged Across Concrete.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah. That's my favorite, because I love Mel Gibson in anything.
Well, he and Vince Vaughn are great together. They have great
chemistry. They're excellent. Vince Vaughn, the problem I have with Cell Block is that I don't believe for 1 minute Vince Vaughn was a boxer. He's very slow in his motions. The choreography of the fights are ridiculous. People lead with their faces.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
It's brutal. It's violent, like all his films, and his character is really interesting. I love it. But the downfall for me is, he is this big, violent former boxer, and he ain't selling me on that.
Yeah.
I buy the two as cops in Dragged Across Concrete.
Yeah.
So that one's my favorite for that reason.
Well, good news. Ridley Scott is going to direct an S. Craig Zoller script.
Oh,
so that should be interesting, because I've been waiting. S. Craig Zoller has put out a comic book. And he drew it as well. So he's a visual guy.
Okay.
You can buy it. But he just doesn't work a whole lot. He just doesn't quite put out the amount of films that I would like to see, frankly. But he's written quite a bit of stuff that other people have directed. And I just read that Ridley's gonna direct something that he wrote. So that could be a really interesting combination. Those two guys as a creative duo. You know what I mean? But
it'd probably be very, very brutal.
The
one thing I liked about Dragged Across Concrete is that, and in all his movies, that you have characters you care about, no matter what they are. They're protagonists. They could be shitbags, but he makes them interesting. The thing that bothers me that Ridley Scott is doing it, and he's the opposite. He creates characters you don't give a shit about.
Oh, he's a visual guy. I think
he's visual, but it's like
he's hit or miss when it comes to creating characters that you like, because I do like Michael Douglas's character in Black Rain. I like Andy Garcia. I think those were likable, but I also think that those are actors which portray a likability that audiences typically respond to. So
I love Ripley as a character. I did love
absolutely.
Her. Yeah. He was the only one on the Nostromo that I cared about.
But Rick Deckard I'm kind of indifferent on him in a lot of ways. There is an arc there, and he does become a better man by the end of Blade Runner. But at the same time, he does come off in the beginning as sort of an unlikable, sort of bureaucratic cop, and who's who's just sort of
painting by numbers.
Yeah, just sort of listening, through life, not really having any kind of direction. And then obviously the hunter becomes the hunted, and then you've got this sort of, and then he falls in love. So there is sort of an arc there. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think that sometimes Ridley's characters can be a little impenetrable to a large degree, unless it's a really great actor who obviously connects with the audience.
Personality to it.
Yeah. But I was reading Brian Cox was just blasting Napoleon the other day. He's just like, awful film, horrible film. I should have played that. I would have done a much better job. And I was like, he's probably right.
Oh, that's another movie that I saw recently that I really loved. The hell was it called though? Brian Cox is and the guy who played Speed Racer.
Emil Hirsch.
Yes. They're a father and son morticians or they're not morticians. They're MEs, medical examiners in this town. Do you know that one?
No, I'm writing it down because I have never heard this. Because I like Emil. I think he's really talented. Yeah, he was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yes,
he's great. Let me look this up because I'm intrigued. Brian Cox. Emil Hirsch.
It's a horror film.
The Autopsy of Jane
Doe. Autopsy of Jane Doe. Yep.
Okay. I'm putting this down, dude.
Yeah. It's a movie. You really like these characters, and the movie just goes off the freaking rails at some point. And you're like, what? What is happening here?
Yeah.
It's really good.
That doesn't happen often these days. Everything's so formulaic and so homogenized, and you can just kind of predict where things are going to happen. It's like Sting said, there's no surprise,
right?
In art anymore, at least in mainstream art or entertainment. It's rare that happens. So we just saw The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
Guy Ritchie is doing some good stuff these days. The Gentleman series is very good. I think I've heard that. And the movie is actually really good. They're two stories that kind of run adjacent to each other, and they're in the same universe. But I think that Guy Ritchie makes movies for men. I think he's one of the last guys that makes movies for men about
Zaylor definitely does.
He does. They just got done filming Landman out here in Texas. Billy Bob Thornton, John Hamm, Demi Moore. It's got a killer cast, but it's all about the oil industry. So that's going to be in Central Texas.
Cool.
So that should be interesting. And I know Tulsa King, I think they're filming as well too right now.
Yeah. Tulsa King's good. I enjoyed that.
Well, and supposedly we're going to get a final season of Yellowstone at some point in time. So whether Costner shows up or not, who knows? But that'll be part of the marketing, is whether or not he'll show up or not.
Yeah.
So that show's so funny to me, because to me it's very much kind of like Sopranos meets Dallas.
Right. Right.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
But I recently watched all 12 seasons of Dallas, and I was just like, because I was like, what were my parents all worked up about over this show? And I figured it out.
Does it hold up?
It holds up really well. Some seasons better than others. Obviously, when Jock, the patriarch, the father, dies, and they have to kind of write him out of the show, it's not quite as good. But there's this one season late in the seasons, like season 9. But JR, this is the craziest storyline. It's one of my favorite seasons because like you're saying, it's completely off the rails. JR hires mercenaries to go to Saudi Arabia and blow up the oil wells in order to make
U.S. oil worth more.
U.S. oil worth more. and he does it. He hires these guys. They go over, and then he says, no, abort the mission. They kind of do it anyway. And then he gets into trouble, and all this stuff ensues. And one of the mercenaries is coming after him and kidnaps his son. It's nuts, dude. It is nuts.
Sounds cool.
Bobby and JR are both carrying around guns all the time because they're afraid that this guy's going to come out of nowhere. And it's just so insane. But at the same time,
where is Dallas? Is that streaming anywhere?
I think it's streaming. I'm trying to remember who owns that. I'm not sure if it's Paramount, where you can access it, but it's definitely streaming. You probably got to either subscribe or you need to buy the seasons. But I think the first 3 to 4 seasons of Dallas is probably the best writing. It's really good because you've got all the sort of classic tropes. You've got the feuding brothers. You've got sort of the wise old king. These are sort of these archetypes that work no matter when, what age you're telling them in. But then you've got just sort of the the magnetism and talent of Larry Hagman, who made that
Right.
show, you know, what it was. Something like 80 million people tuned in to watch Who
Oh,
Shot JR.
yeah. It's
It's
on
just crazy.
Freevee.
Is it on Freevee?
Yeah, they
Awesome.
got season 2 through 14.
Yep. There was the season 1 was a special that they did, like a 3-hour special. It was so popular that they put it into production.
Oh,
So,
okay. All
yeah.
right.
Yeah,
All right.
totally.
I'll have to check some of those out.
It's some of that is, you know, it's amazing. The highest stream shows are all old shows right now, whether it's Pluto, Freevee, any of these. People are
Yeah.
watching Miami Vice, they're watching Magnum, they're watching
Yeah.
Dallas, they're watching Seinfeld, Friends. You know, it's kind of amazing how and I think it's a testament to the talent that was attached to those shows, writing and actors of that era. You
Yeah.
just don't quite get anymore. You know,
Yeah.
geez, I wonder why.
Yeah, I
You
wonder
know?
why.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, sadly, we're out of time. Grant, what's the best way our viewers can support you?
They could go to compasscomics.com. They can find out whenever I have a campaign going, the link will be right there. You can get caught up on all the books that we've published so far, and sign up to the newsletter, and you'll get updated on everything that's happening.
Awesome. And is there another way viewers can also stay up to date on what you have going on? Twitter, Facebook?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter all the time.
Okay.
Facebook, and Instagram.
Cool. Does Compass Comics have a Facebook page?
No, it's just
Twitter?
me. Yeah.
Okay,
it's
just you.
me.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's under I think it's G Nolan 12.
Okay. Yeah, I'll post all that stuff in
Okay,
the
great.
description so people can find you.
Cool.
All right. For more videos like this one, subscribe to Bounding Into Comics channel on YouTube. Also, make sure and like this video and leave us a comment. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, brother. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys.